Okay, at 6 p.m., we'll call the meeting to order. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please have roll call, Mike.
Mr. Davis? Here. Mrs. Lee? Here. Mrs. Head? Here. Mr. Bendel?
Here.
Mrs. Brown? Here. Mr. Krings?
Here.
Mrs. Medina? Here.
Thank you, Maureen. First item on our agenda is approval of the minutes.
I would make a motion to approve the regular Board of Education meeting minutes of May 14th and the special Board of Education meeting open and closed of May 14th.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the regular Board of Education meeting minutes of May 14th and the special Board of Education meeting minutes open and closed session of May 14th. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. I don't think we have any comments from the citizens tonight, so we can move on to committee reports. John, Business Services.
Thank you, John. Business Services had two meetings on Monday. The first meeting was at 4:30 at our building trade home for the year. It was at 6810 Church Avenue, and the owner is a rather colorful gentleman, and he gave us some details on his house and the building of his house. And again, every time we go to one of these houses, it never ceases to amaze at least me, and I know the other board members, we talk about it, that the talent of our students and the individuals that are in these classes and building these houses and the stuff they take on. This year they did something different where they hadn't done it in the past, is they put actual stone on the outside of the house. One of the things that I learned is that they start from the top and go down rather than down and go up. So they don't get mortar and everything all over the brick that they already installed. So that was always interesting to find out.
What do they do, hold it until it sticks or something?
They butter it up and they start on the top.
Because it has to adhere.
Right.
Yeah. It's a specialized mortar that
Right.
is,
It's more sticky than...
it's more glue than mortar, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sticks on, and then if they just keep going down rather than go
Just
up.
thought I'd ask.
And the other advantage of that is that the water will also, any water that gets in behind it trickles down and doesn't get caught in the bottom because it just drops out. So that's one of the things. The other thing is that the difference with this house is that there was no basement in this house. So the entire house, because the water table was about 2 to 2.5 feet below the basement or where the slab was poured. And in order to build that basement, it would cost about $40,000 to $60,000 to bring in the fill, make the pads and everything, and then everything's up about 6 to 8 feet. So the homeowner decided not to do that, and then along with that, then they have complete hydronic heat inside the floor, so the whole floor was heated with heat, hot water for the house, and then also for the garage.
And the wife's question was, where do we go if there's a tornado?
You have inside a room that's got the best security where you go in that case. I don't know if anybody else had any comments about the house.
Tell me about the 6 contractors they had there.
Yes.
Their
Oh,
history.
another one of the, Jerry Klinowski was the homeowner, and he had taught in tech ed at the junior high here for multiple years. So he had, not only did they have, because this is also the 20th house that Terry Boris and his group had built, so they made some special signage and some special plaques for the students, but then he also showcased 6 former students that he had that were tradespeople building his house. One was from Bone that did the excavating, one was from the concrete people, one was in the electrical, one was in the plumbing.
Heated and air.
The HVAC. There was the 5th one, and then there was a 6th one that was also in one of those trades.
Excavator or something?
Yeah, that was the excavator
Yeah.
Bones. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So he had, and he'd go there, he goes, shop class. He was in my 8th grade shop class, and he was in the building trades class.
6 out of 6.
6 out of 6. 8th grade shop class, building trades. So he also made pictures for them and gave them special signage and plaques, just because he wanted to showcase to the public that came and visited his house, that these people, this program works and these kids are staying in the Rapids area as far as coming back to work. The other thing he noted, he said he used to, when he taught, always push four-year schools. He's starting to rethink that and says maybe we ought to be looking at the tech schools and the trades and that type of thing, because they're saying within the next 5 to 10 years, an electrician and a plumber will probably be more needed than doctors and healthcare workers. So the shortage could be real in the building trades, and they're always looking for people now. Matter of fact, one of the electrician former students has opened his own business, and he has 6 employees under him, and he actually said he could use 2 to 3 more. So some of these some of these students in the class are looking at possibly going into the tech colleges or through the apprenticeships. That's it. I was trying to think of internships, but it's apprenticeships, so that they can get these jobs and get hired as a plumber or an electrician.
Yeah, it's always interesting to tour the houses, and I think this year especially they had a pretty colorful couple of owners. I'm sure the students had a lot of fun. I mean, just hearing the stories that they talked about, it had to be a good time for the kids, and you're learning, but there's nothing wrong with having fun at work too. I just thought it was funny how they had a time clock set up for them when they got electricity, that they had to punch in and punch out, just like they were going to work, so that was pretty neat.
And then after that, we came back and did our second meeting, which that started at 6 o'clock. And within that meeting, we had one consent agenda item. I don't know if anybody wants that held out at all. Okay, the consent agenda was a kitchen maintenance at Grove, Howe, and Washington Elementary approval. What we have to do is replace some grease traps. We had 3 bids. The low bid, which actually was from a local contractor, however, they could not do all of the jobs. So, and then along with that, they would not be able to do it till basically next year. So unfortunately, the project has to be done this year. So the low bidder in the award, the committee recommends, and I move that we accept a proposal from Tweed Garrett Mechanical for the replacement of the kitchen grease traps at Grove, Howe, and Washington Elementary Schools at a cost of $21,200, with the funding from the food service budget be recommended.
Second.
Okay, we have motion and second to approve Tweed Garrett Mechanical replacing the grease traps at Grove, Howe, and Washington at a cost of $21,200 with funding from food service budget. Could we have roll call, please, Maureen?
Mrs. Medina?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Cranes?
Yes.
Mrs. Head?
Yes.
Mrs. Rayle?
Yes.
Mr. Bendel?
Yes.
Thank you, Maureen.
Then the balance of ours was update. We had a couple purchases. One would be the lifeguard defibrillators that we had throughout the school district. What we had found out is that there was a recall on some of the defibrillators, and that the age was also almost 18 years. Some of them 15 to 18 years.
Older, yes.
Yeah. And so they needed to be updated and replaced. And was that you, Kathy, that was doing that?
Me?
Yeah. No.
Kathy Jarozinski.
Ah, I knew it was a Kathy. So she did a very good job in that she got a rebate or a credit on the defective units, even though they are basically all out of warranty. And then she also got a discount on the replacement of the units, so all 17 units will be updated within our facilities. Then we had a update on the outcome of the Internal Revenue Service audit, of which the district and the bottom line had to pay about $720. I called it a fine. Dan said it was.
It was taxes.
It was taxes, yeah. $720 to the IRS. And with that, the committee recommends and I submit the rest of our meeting minutes.
Second.
Okay, we have motion and second to approve the meeting minutes from the Business Service Committee of June 4th, 2018. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Thanks for your report, John. We can move on to personnel. Sandy.
Personnel Services met last Monday, June 4th, and from that meeting, we have 16 consent agenda items, and they are as follows. Number 1, the committee recommends and I move to approve the 2018 summer school support staff appointments. 2, the committee recommends and I move to approve the 2018 summer support staff appointments. 3, the committee recommends and I move to approve the 12 support staff appointments. And on these, if you notice, there were a lot of them that were special ed. These had been long-term subs in special ed. 4th, the committee recommends and I move to approve the 2 professional staff appointments. And that Meade Elementary Charter School, that's an additional staff. They need additional social worker. 5, the committee recommends and I move to approve the 2 professional staff resignations. 6, the committee recommends and I move to approve the 1 support staff resignation. 7, the committee recommends and I move to approve the 2 support staff early retirements. 8, the committee recommends and I move to approve Board Policy 332, experimental innovative programs for second reading. Basically, it's just making them do this a month earlier. They're changing from November to October, December to November. Okay. 9, I'd like to pull 9 out and discuss it at the end. 10, the committee recommends and I move to approve Board Policy 432, school attendance boundaries for second reading. Okay. 11, the committee recommends and I move to approve Board Policy 523.1, staff physical examinations for first reading. Basically, we're not doing TV tests anymore. They're just going to sign a paper that said we haven't been out of the country. Yes, TV's way in the downswing. So we get a case? 12, the committee recommends and I move to approve the language changes for the physical examination section of the employee handbooks for administrators and non-represented staff, custodial and maintenance staff, food services staff, office clerical and aid support staff, and professional staff as recommended in the June 2018 Personnel Services Committee agenda and background, which was also attachment E. And we're just doing some of these because the state statute changed, so we're changing our policy. Let's see. 13, the committee recommends and I move to approve the language changes for the sick leave section of the employee handbooks for custodial and maintenance staff, food services staff, office clerical and aid support staff, and professional staff as recommended with the changes noted in the June 2018 Personnel Service Committee agenda in the background, which was attachment F. Let's see, now we're on to
G.
14. The other side, okay. The committee recommends and I move to approve the non-athletic co-curricular pay rate percentages as presented to the committee to start effective at the start of the 2018-19 school year. I believe you got in your packet this with the coding. When you look back at it, the green are those things that are going to be going, that are at East now, that are going to be going to Rams. And red things are new additions. So when you review that again, that's what that is. What we're changing is percentages. For example, at Rams, we're going from 62% to 69%, and at Lincoln High School, we're going to 147% to 161%. And number 15, I'd like that held out.
Can I back up a minute?
Yes.
14? The right 3 columns, base calculator options, what's that?
We're getting to that in number 15.
Oh,
I have a question. Some of them that said no longer, does that mean they're not going to have a program? If those say it's 0 and there's nothing there.
that means
Right.
new.
That's been, that position, if it's gone to a 0, has been eliminated.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes. Right?
Yeah, I guess I would just like to note for the board is Mrs. Head is reading through this, I'm noticing that there is on this print copy at least one error, so that we could get that noted properly before the minutes would be approved. Under the left column at near the top of page 5, the web positions at the middle school, both of those were intended to be 2% each, and the first one says 4. That should be a 2, not 4. And if you look at the print, or the color print copies from our committee meeting last Monday that Mrs. Head is referring to, I think you will note that both of those web positions in red print are both listed as 2. So I just wanted to make sure that correction was noted.
15 is spelled out. And the last consent agenda item, the committee recommends and I move to approve the addition of 1 4 hours per day non-classified cleaning position to be added to the Buildings and Grounds Department for placement at Meade Elementary Charter School beginning on June 8, 2018. It's used so much they're having a very difficult time doing all the cleaning, and they're seeing more sicknesses in kids' absence, and they think with more cleaning done, we can make that less. So is anybody else got any of those held up besides those 2?
You said 9 and...
9 and 15.
Okay.
I'll second that then.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve PS 1 through 8 and 10 through 14 and 16. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried.
The reason I asked to have 9 held out is going through this, if you go down to our minutes from our committee and you go under resources, and it says curriculum development time, and it goes maximum of 24 hours paid at the curriculum development rate, or 2 DEUs. And then when you go to what we're going to be talking about in educational services, you go to the agenda then, that was on page 3, and we look at removing the option for teachers to be paid at the hourly rate of $14 for professional development activities when a DEU or hours towards a DEU are offered. I think we need some clarification. I think we could have a lot of problems of, can you do it, can't we do it, what is it? Is it $14? It's more than $14? Yep. So because we need that clarification, that's why I'm asking number 9 to be held out.
Can we table that until next month?
If you're open to it, I'd love to have a conversation on the topic and clarify for you, and also then retain the policy as it's written, if you so choose, of course. So Sandy is 100% correct with reference to decreasing the confusion around, is it for money, is it for $14 an hour, $18 an hour, is it for DEUs, is it, what does this look like? And to go back to the beginning, when we get into ed service, we're going to talk about the supplemental pay plan, these new DEU options that were thrown out. And frankly, the rationale or the move behind it is not necessarily to decrease options for staff, but to do a little bit of streamlining, and then also a little bit of, actually increase options for staff, and a little bit of cajoling in a certain direction over another when you talk about boosting salary longer term. Meaning it makes a lot more sense to take DEU hours or DEU, $125 for every DEU in my salary on an annual basis than it does $14 an hour for 10 hours, for example, that I get paid out one time. There are a couple of different clarifications around that. One thing that was happening, and now we're talking about strictly professional development, so curriculum, new courses in curriculum writing, we're going to set aside, talk about that in a second. And Kathy, feel free to chime in anytime. But the bottom line was, when we developed DEU courses, DEU eligible courses, some were for $14 an hour and DEUs, some were for $14 an hour only, some were for DEUs only. So some of that conversation was around streamlining that or making that in a much more direct fashion for staff members to understand. If you do this, it equates to DEUs or DEU hours, period. So that's one aspect that we attempted to remedy with the modifications to the supplemental pay plan. That's different from and separate from curriculum writing rate, which is $18 per hour as it stands right now, but also eligible for DEUs. That's not new. So this approach of developing a new course, what's new is that it's capped at 24 hours. In the past, it was capped at 20. The reason we went to 24 was because that exactly equates to 2 DEUs. right? That approval process and those choices are retained. Curriculum writing is somewhat similar in that that's an option now to put towards DEU hours. 1 hour equals, 1 hour of time equals 1 hour towards a DEU. But retaining the $18 an hour compensation for those two things, curriculum writing and new course development, would be okay. This that you're articulating, we haven't ferreted out and explained in enough detail. So what I'd advocate for is retaining the language as it stands in the policy that you're talking about here in personnel services, and simply inputting on our plan, the DEU plan, the supplemental pay plan, inputting, an additional bullet point that says $14 an hour compensation for, PD courses and the like you are no longer eligible, and that's DEU hours or DEU option only. $18 an hour compensation for curriculum writing, new coursework, new courses, and curriculum writing is still a possibility. Now, why would we retain that? We would retain that because there are opportunities, I would argue, that someone would want to go for the $18 an hour curriculum writing compensation piece over the DEU piece, and some of that has to do with accruing 6 DEUs within that school year, and then still wanting to develop a new course for approval at some point and being eligible for some sort of compensation towards that. We can keep those as separate and distinct items and clarify that on the supplemental pay plan. And ultimately, if you want the 100% honest truth, that $18 hour curriculum writing and DEU equation thing wasn't really discussed and ferreted out. What we were looking at was identifying this $14 an hour rate with reference to taking these courses. And when we put them all together, the conversation that Kathy and I had prior to coming into the meeting, because Ryan brought that up at about 5:30 this afternoon or 5:30 this evening, and I'll admit that wasn't something that we sat around and ferreted out. But in conversation, it does make some sense to retain it simply because that's not really the area of focus that we were attempting to address, and I believe we can clarify that. In the future, we can say, you know what, this works best just having this be all DEU-based or potentially all compensation-based as we move into next year. So into the following year after we try this out, what I'd advocate for, if you're agreeable, is retain the language as is indicated in the policy, and then simply the approval of the supplemental pay in ed services would be pending the inclusion of, or with the inclusion of, an additional bullet point that simply says we're wiping away this $14 an hour compensation piece, and that pay, you would be eligible for pay for curriculum, new course writing or curriculum writing. And those are the only two caveats that are listed in the supplemental pay plan, which would be talked about in ed services. The alternative, and then I'll be done talking, I promise. The alternative would be to say, as Sandy indicates, no, let's just make it all towards DEU hours, or make it so that it's not, dissonant between we're funneling you towards DEU hours. And I say we have that option. The reason I wouldn't want to pull that away is because I think there are cases and times in which the $18 an hour compensation for curriculum writing and new course development might be, the box might be checked. In addition, it's a decent segue, and it is, an intermediary as we move down this path, number 2. And then number 3, there is still some determination and conversation we're going to have on whether or not this $14 an hour removal is an indirect benefit to both staff and administration with reference to monitoring the program. So I'd say it's a decent compromise, as it were. I mean, we're not really looking at compromising, but a segue, an intermediary to get us from where we currently are now to what we'll attempt to implement for what we will implement next year and kind of track and then develop as time goes on. We could absolutely go to the DEU process, but we haven't had that opportunity really to have a solid conversation around it or talk about it with staff. The $14 an hour piece and the classes, that was the original intent, was around the PD courses and all of these options that staff have available to them. And it wasn't about limiting options. It was about really tailoring it in a more cohesive fashion, because the classes, as I mentioned on the outset, some were $14 an hour compensation, some were for DEUs, some were for both, and it kind of depended upon circumstance. And in this case, it is much more directive. One of the things that I'll point to is if we clarify that piece around curriculum writing and new course development, one of the things that comes up continuously is, oh, can I get a DEU for that? Can I get a DEU for this? Can I get a DEU? And the answer to that question is no. What is eligible for DEU hours and DEUs is outlined in the supplemental pay plan, period, across the board. Now, as we create a list of things that people do that they might find interest in accruing DEU hours for, we could absolutely say, yeah, that sounds reasonable, and let's put that in, and maybe we'll include it the following year as we, evaluate the plan.
And I just want the other board members to know that when we look at a maximum of 24 hours or 2 DEUs, that's developing the course, and then if it's divided between 2 people or among 6 people or 12 people, that's the max for that course development.
Correct.
Okay. Do we want to vote on that, I guess? I guess we can try it. Okay. We want, right? We voted on the other ones.
Okay. You gonna make the motion?
Yeah, I am. I'm looking for it right now. Got lots of papers.
Second, and then you make it.
Okay. The committee recommends and I move to approve Board Policy 332.1, Exhibit 1, Process Guidelines for Requesting New Courses form for second reading.
Second.
Okay, we have motion and second to approve Board Policy 332.1, Exhibit 1, Process Guidelines for Requesting New Courses form for second reading. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And then the other one I asked to have out was number 15, and that was to determine what the new base wage calculator to be with the athletic and non-athletic co-curricular pay percentages. It was, just where I had all these papers. Second row.
Yeah.
For about 7 or 8 years, we were at $35,400 for the base wage calculator for athletics. Last year, we took the athletics and we went to $36,500 just last year. And academic co-curriculars didn't change. So we're looking at bringing the academic or non-athletic co-curriculars up. And we had that sheet where it showed you 36,500, 37,000, and 38,000. And I'm saying we're doing a lot of things. We've had a lot of little incremental raises, the last couple of months. Here, there, everywhere. We've gotten this new thing on DEUs, and I was thinking that we should stay at 37,000. Otherwise, we're taking this athletics, and they're going to be going up in 2 years substantially. And I just think we need to wait and see to see what's going to happen with our budget in this coming year because we've done a lot of raises. So that's why I asked to have it pulled out and voted on separately. So, make that motion.
Well, that's the part I'm confused at, because I was reading it, and you say...
The committee voted to go to 38,000.
But we're going to re-vote to go stay at 37.
You can vote, now we're going to say, I'll read it for 38, and if you vote yes, then you're going to say 38. If you vote no, then 38 won't pass, and we'll have another figure in there.
Correct.
So right now we're going to vote on, do you agree with taking both of those to 38,000 for the base calculator?
That's what the committee approved, John. The committee on a 2-to-1 vote approved 38,000 as the calculator.
Right. And for the benefit of the board that wasn't part of that committee meeting, there are, the estimate is about $10,000 turnaround, $2,000 to go to 38, $2,000 give or take for the non-athletic co-curriculars, and about $8,000 or some change for athletic co-curriculars to move from where it's at to 38 for a total of $10,000.
And our goal, I think, is to get to what the starting wage of a teacher is, which would be...
Right, but that's, it's taking us a while.
Right.
I remember when I was on the committee and we were talking about that, being thankful that the staff helped us with these discussions, because with us doing it, how do you figure all this out? So I'm inclined to go with their recommendation.
And, just be aware, that the athletics will, if you, are still be getting another bump. 1,500 again. Okay, I'll just read the motion now. Is there any more discussion? Okay.
On the clarification of one,
Right now, we're voting on whether you agree with going to both of them at $38,000 for the base calculator.
okay.
Okay? The committee recommends and I move to approve $38,000 as the new base wage calculator to be used with athletic and non-athletic co-curricular with paid percentage rates to calculate wages for district coaching and advisor positions beginning with the start of the 2018-19 school year, with the exception that coaches and advisors currently employed in a position prior to the 2018-19 school year shall maintain the wage received in the 2017-18 school year so long as they maintain continuous employment in the coaching or advisory position and the 2017-18 wage rate is higher than the wage calculated in the 2018-19 and thereafter. I'd ask this to be roll call.
I'll second that.
We make this roll call.
Sure.
Let her second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve $38,000 as the new base wage calculator to be used with athletic and non-athletic co-curricular pay percentage rates to calculate wages for district coaching and advisor positions beginning with the start of the 18-19 school year, with the exception that coaches and advisors currently employed in a position prior to the 2018-19 school year shall maintain the wage received in the 2017-18 school year, so long as they maintain continuous employment in the coaching or advising position and the 2017-18 wage rate is higher than the wage calculated in the 2018-19 and thereafter.
Would you repeat that? Okay.
No, I will not. We have roll call, please.
Mr. Bembo?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Hett?
No.
Mrs. Rayle?
Yes.
Mrs. Medina?
Yes.
Mr. Cranes?
Yes.
Okay.
Motion passes.
And then we had a professional staff early retirement request submitted past the deadline. We had two individuals that contacted him about submitting early retirement requests effective at the close of this school year. Our current employee handbooks titled Post-Employment Insurance Benefit, it says that requests for this early retirement must be filed with the district administrator or designee no later than Friday prior to the March Personnel Services Committee meeting for the retirement at the end of the second semester. And it says semester even though we're in trimesters right now. Dr. Christianson explained that both employees are also requesting to receive the early retirement benefit health insurance coverage. The aforementioned handbook language has been approved by the Board of Education. We have not approved any requests for participation in the early retirement plan, which arrived after that March deadline. One previous request from a professional staff employee for a mid-year retirement to include participation in the early retirement plan was denied by this board because the board set clear expectations for professional staff members to complete the contract year agreement they entered into and to adhere to the request deadline as outlined in the professional staff employee handbook. After much discussion, it was decided that we would consider different options and we'll discuss it at a future board meeting, and there is a closed meeting after this meeting tonight just to discuss this issue. And with that, I move that the minutes from the June 4th Personnel Services Committee meeting be approved as printed. I'll second that.
Okay, we have motion and a second to approve the Personnel Services Committee meeting minutes of June 4th, 2018. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and it's approved. Thank you, Sandy. We move on to Ed Services. Ann.
May I just clarify, did you want that one correction? in the
Yes,
minutes?
yes. Thank you.
Okay. The Educational Services Committee also met on June 4th. And did we really not start till 7:45?
Yeah.
Sounds right.
You
had to bring that up.
No, I thought that was in the script. Was it really?
Remember we were
waiting.
doing other things?
Oh, yes.
We had 16 items and
I know.
that's a lot of this.
Now you know why it takes so long.
And I was at Personnel Services.
Yes, yeah, that was the problem.
My fault.
Yeah, it was Ed's too, yeah. There was a lot of fault going around there. All right. So there was no public comment. No one dared. No, I'm just kidding.
No one stayed around.
Yeah. We started out with actionable items, and we had 6 consent agenda items. Does anyone want any of those held out?
Are we going to clarify that one in this?
Yes, I think that would be
So we
great.
could pull that out?
That'd be a great idea.
ES 5. ES 5.
5, right.
Yeah, it would be ES 5.
Okay. The first consent agenda item was about grants, and the first one was the Carl Perkins grant. Eric Seiler, our Career and Technical Education Coordinator, shared goals of the Carl Perkins grant application for the 2018-19 school year, as well as how the grant funds will be expended. He noted that there are 6 areas to CTE, and grant monies are used for several things, including professional development and capital equipment. The committee made a motion to approve the Carl Perkins grant for the 2018-19 school year in the amount of $44,167.18. Then we went on to the Department of Workforce Development Technical Incentive Grant, and Mr. Seiler stated that 73 students in Wisconsin Rapids Public Schools utilized the grant last year through apprenticeships. WRPS was ranked 8th in the state of districts using this grant. WRPS and area business and industry work together to provide apprenticeship opportunities and approved industry-recognized certifications for students. And the Department of Workforce Development Technical Incentive Grant for the 2018-19 school year is in the amount of $46,720. Then we went on to discuss the Great Lakes Summer Melt Texting Initiative Grant, which the title of which I got a chuckle out of. And Ron Rasmussen was here, and he's the principal of Lincoln High School, and he explained that the Great Lakes Grant is intended to ensure that graduating seniors, both at Lincoln High School and River Cities High School, who have committed to attend institutions of higher education, complete necessary tasks for enrollment during the summer before their freshman year. Push notifications via text remind students to complete necessary financial aid, registration, and housing tasks. The grant will pay for a grant coordinator to follow up with students, as well as a counselor to be available to students during the summer. And the Great Lakes grant is in the amount of $47,000 over the 2018 and 19 and the 2019-20 school year. Then we went on to discuss the purchase of a climbing wall for the Wisconsin Rapids Area Middle School, or RAMS. Kathy Stebbins-Hintz, our Director of Curriculum and Instruction, explained that there is currently no climbing wall at RAMS. With 8th grade students moving to RAMS for the 2018-19 school year, and climbing is a part of the physical education curriculum, it is necessary to purchase and install a wall, related equipment, and provide teacher training. Kathy mentioned that the cost estimates are still coming in, and the estimated cost of $29,695 could increase. And if that were to happen, she would bring the motion back to the committee for approval. And this particular wall will be a bouldering wall, which I assume just has bigger rocks in it.
Bigger rocks, and then the way they have to climb is not quite as traverse. They go up, they go sideways, but it isn't high like the others.
Right. And that cost would be for that wall and the equipment and necessary teacher certification would be $29,695. And that would be purchased with district curriculum funds. Then we went on to the supplemental pay plan, which will be held out. And then we went on to consent agenda item 6, which Kathy reviewed the proposed consolidated plan for the Every Student Succeeds Act. Each district is required to submit a plan when the act is authorized. And that's it on that one. So with the committee's recommendation, I move to approve ES 1 through 4 and then ES 6.
Second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Before we go on, I'd like to clarify ES4. I know there was discussion and people have asked, why aren't we taking the wall that's currently at East and moving it over to Rams? And part of that discussion is that the climbing wall is approved and built as in its location. So because of the way the rock wall here at East is that the little rocks are put in with toggle bolts and literally mounted into the wall, you physically can't take them off the wall, move them to a new location and have them certified as a new climbing wall because of the fact that they're probably damaged and the cost of taking them out and everything like that. So the climbing wall will remain at East for intact, and the plan was told to us that they, for 1 week when the freshmen over at Lincoln need to use that climbing wall, they will be bussed over here to East to use that wall. And so the wall will not just go to waste, it's going to be used for educational purposes, but that was part of our discussion in the committee.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve ES 1 through 4 and ES 6. Will you please have roll call, Maureen?
Mrs. Hutt?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Ram?
Yes.
Mr. Cranes?
Yes.
Mrs. Medina?
Yes.
Mr. Bumbo?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Thank you.
Then we'll go back to ES 5, which was about supplemental pay plan, the supplemental pay plan. That's hard to say. For 2018-19. Kathy reviewed changes to the supplemental pay plan for 18-19 school year. Sandy had asked if anyone had done a cost analysis of the changes. Craig Broran, our superintendent, explained that the budget for compensation will be the same as in the past, with funds allocated for each teacher maxing out at $750 annually. He hopes the changes will help with recruitment and retention of teachers. Kathy Stebbins-Hintz noted that the staff at the $70,000 salary will probably take advantage of this new plan, as it is an opportunity they did not have before. And then we'll
continue to add the bullet point.
Can I ask, about how many teachers do we have at the $70,000 cap?
I don't have the exact number off the top of my head. I can tell you that the way we do the costing for base wage increases, which of course, all of our teaching staff have a certain amount of supplemental dollars within their overall wages. But all of the people that are at 70 or higher are in that lowest, highest cost cell, and we have roughly 200 teachers, 200 of our 380 some that are in that lowest cell. So it'd be, not all of them are at 70, but I would say probably, I would estimate 150 to 175 of our teachers are at that level.
Yep. I'd say about a third of our staff. Because I evaluated in developing this, I evaluated, and Lori Stanton from HR shared with me the document that she had, which lists every employee and their salary, corresponding salary, every teaching employee and their salary, and that's...
And then the other one, on that last bullet, providing supplemental pay for district-directed second master's programs. And we understand that's going to be the same as it is for the first master's,
Correct.
which would be $5,000. But then it says, or current national board certifications. Do we need to put in a dollar amount?
Yeah, but that shouldn't be or. So national board certification compensation would be, if you have it, if you have a current national board certification, you get $2,500.
Okay, but they have an or in the thing.
The or should not be there.
Where is that, Cindy?
The last bullet, page 3.
You're talking about the...
This was on the agenda.
So you're not talking about the attachment right now?
On the background.
Just it was on page 3.
So last bullet near the top.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, in the, yes.
So that would just be in addition, not really or. That's not the,
It probably should almost be two separate bulleted items.
Correct.
They're separate.
Yeah, I
Correct.
could say that.
District directed second masters, and the or would be, I think, just as in a narrative fashion, but if you take that out, national board certification, which is a
Separate bullet.
correct.
And it doesn't say it like that in the document.
In the document, it's clear.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Could I just make a recommendation for what the bullet could say to what Craig summarized for you before and to kind of clarify? So if we could just add a bullet under Roman 1 of the supplemental pay plan, it could be the last bullet.
So this would have been, I don't know that we have a copy in the board
It was
packets.
attachment B.
This would have been included in your ed services packet.
So if you look, Roman 1 says DEUs, and then there are several bullets under that, and we could add a bullet which states teachers will no longer have the option to be paid at the hourly rate of $14 for professional development activities when a DEU or hours toward a DEU are offered, semicolon, teachers retain the option of being paid $18 per hour for curriculum writing and curriculum development for new courses. Does that clarify that then?
And I assume Maureen has all the.
And I'll share that with
First 4
Maureen. I
words.
won't make her, if you're comfortable with that.
I got Tony
And then
Bucks
that
that says she's
clarifies.
got it right now. I'm comfortable with that too, yeah.
Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, so have we, I just think we need a real close cost analysis after 1 year of this.
Absolutely. Yep. I will absolutely get you that number probably this time next year.
Okay. All right. So the committee recommends, and I move that we adopt ES5 with the changes that we've just discussed.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt ES5 with the noted changes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, then we'll go on to the updates. We have one update about student travel. 3 Lincoln High School students and 2 East Junior High School students will be traveling to Atlanta, Georgia from June 27th to July 2nd, 2018 for FCCLA Nationals. Lynn Borski and Valerie DeVries Pullman, our FCE teachers, will chaperone those students. And then our second update was on athletic facilities. Mr. Rasmussen updated the committee on the Lincoln High School strategic plan with regard to athletic facilities. Ron noted that the pool replacement and wrestling and gymnastic rooms were part of the first phase. Replacing the track, resodding the football field, and improving the softball and baseball diamonds are future projects. He indicated that there is a possible collaboration with the American Legion Rangers and Ramblers baseball teams to improve the baseball and softball facilities. And with that, the committee recommends, and I move the adoption of the remainder of the committee meeting minutes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes of the Educational Service Committee of June 4th, 2018. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Thank you, Ann. We'll move on to agenda referrals, information requests. Do they have anything this month?
I have one, and I don't want you to work that hard on it, but when I was out, at Grove School, one of the teachers said she was buying books for the kids that she thought she shouldn't have to do, and I'm wondering just how many teachers do that, and if I could get that information, I'd appreciate it.
No problem. Specifically books or supplies, do you want to know in general? Books.
These were.
Okay. Anything else? All right, legislative agenda. Is there anything going on, John?
Not a whole lot. There is one thing. On June 4th, the Blue Ribbon Committee Commission on School Funding held their last of 8 meetings. The commission heard from the invited speakers for the first part of it, and then they opened it up to the public for the second part. So they have now ended up and mapped out their next steps to close. At the close of the hearing, they plan to meet individually, and I'm guessing this is the co-chairs, Joel Kitchens and Senator Luther Olson, plan to meet individually with each member of the commission over the next couple of months, accompanied by staff from the nonpartisan Legislative Fiscal Bureau. Together, they'll go over what each member believes needs to be done to reform school funding and then work to draft proposals. The commission will then come together once more as a group to finalize its proposals before making recommendations to Governor Walker and the legislature. Senator Olson said the plan is to present multiple proposals addressing individual topics or issues instead of one large study report that tries to address too many of the problems. Wasby then thanked all of the people that testified at the different meetings in the different locations throughout the state. So we are going to be waiting for the rest of that. The other thing that I found interesting, and I'm not sure, it was interesting about the committee. Okay, there's a Department of the Workforce Grants, which we've applied for. Legislative Council study and committee members named. So the 2 parts that they're looking at is the 2018 study committees will be in particular interested to the school leaders of Legislative Council Study Committee on Identification and Management of Dyslexia. And then the second part is the Legislative Council Study Committee on Investment in the Use of School Trust Funds. That's the one that interested me. There's no details on what they plan to do, but I don't like the idea that they're trying to play as trust funds. But I do know that some of those are protected by law, so we can't touch that money. But whenever the legislator is involved with trust funds, it always scares me. And then the training grants, which we talked about, is the only other thing on there. So that would be all I have.
Okay, thank you for the report.
Oh, I guess there was one more thing. Kenosha was the first school district to get the safety grant money so far. The other part of it is that in some of the discussions is that school districts are disappointed on how the safety grant shook out, because what the governor originally proposed and what actually came out are far different than what we can do with the funds, and basically very limited of what we can actually do with the money that we get.
Absolutely true.
And which is disheartening because, again, they want us to have local control, but yet we can't.
They don't let us just make the decisions.
Yeah, and we, as long as you're on the topic, and I'll be brief, I promise, we had submitted the grant. Maureen did all kinds and tons of work on that in conjunction with me, and we got that submitted the morning of June 8th, which is what the deadline was. We are requesting just shy of $260,000 in advance funding, which our threshold for 13 facilities at $20,000 apiece is $260,000, and we're $259,720, I believe, is our request. And then the primary request was limited to $10,000 per building, and that's probably the most difficult piece because there were 2 qualified things that you could do. Door locks, which we don't have any door locks we need to update or change, and then this shatter or bullet-resistant film that you place on one entrance. When those dollars were totaled up, we would have $10,000 per building. This is under the grant, $130,000, 13 facilities. But when we total that up based on the $15 per square foot threshold, also laid out in the grant requirements, which we didn't find out about until Tuesday, the week prior to the grant being submitted, or maybe it was even Thursday. In a webinar, I don't recall, but less than a week prior to the grant needing to be submitted, this $15 per square foot threshold was shared. In that was the first time I had seen that or heard it. Nonetheless, we met that threshold, but that total is only like $11,220 or something in that ballpark. And that's all we're eligible for under the primary. So our total request is in the $270,000 range, which is still, a phenomenal dollar amount. And what I intend to do is once we're notified of our award, And due to timing, we didn't get it on the agenda for tonight, but I want to share some specifics with you about what what our application actually looked like, and then whether or not we get this award, what this means to our district facilities, both short-term and long-term. So
Certainly seemed like it became a political thing. Rather than giving money to say, do what you need to do in your schools, it became, we paid lip service to security by saying, you can film up some glass. I think we need more.
It turned out from what it was originally and what the intent was to what it became was, it's almost comical. I mean, people did a lot of work and you're not really getting what you need. And we're not alone. I mean, a lot of districts are not happy with the way this thing shook out because it really is.
Hard to complain when you get money.
that's the piece. I mean, I think any dollar that we put towards making these improvements is a good dollar spent. But
there's so much more we can do with it.
Yeah, and
Respect for educators.
I'd be happy to go into a very long diatribe about the grant process and some of the criteria and stipulations, because it absolutely, it's just tough to understand.
It's frustrating.
The biggest question that I have is, if the primary funding is for the bullet-resistant film on entrances, why wouldn't that be? You're capped at 10 grand, but you can only spend up to 10 grand. So spend that 10,000 when you're talking about your entrances, all entrances in vulnerable areas, if this film is a priority. The second piece is that, in my opinion, I think that pigeonholes you in decision-making with how you're going to spend some of your advanced grant dollars, because clearly putting bullet-resistant film on 2 doors in a facility like Lincoln High School does absolutely nothing. So you're going to have to spend those dollars to finish that. And at Lincoln, unfortunately, that number is like $60,000 just to complete Lincoln High School, which is part of our advanced funding request. Right. But if the primary is the bullet, and shatter-resistant film, that would lead you, I would say, cognitively and pragmatically down the path of, well, clearly you need to do more. And then the remainder of our funding request has most to do with surveillance and access control, which is applicable. But when it's all said and done, we're probably able to, if it's approved, get 4 buildings fully updated and then work on, additional buildings to the tune of about $50,000 per as this grant funding rolls out, because there's still questions about whether or not it's a 3-year approach, whether or not there'll be dollars available next year and dollars available in the third year. And I don't have the answer to that. I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody that does. So that's another question mark that's there. And nonetheless, even if that's not the case, let's pretend that it's round 1 and that's it, and we get awarded that. We're going to move forward with those buildings, and then of course have some conversations about what we have to do in our other facilities, whether that be 1 building per year for the next several, or whether that be some, conglomeration of that approach. So kind of a little foreshadowing into what you'll hear when we're notified if we are awarded the grant. It sounds as though, that's one caveat that I'll put out there, that's a very positive thing, that if you put the application in, you follow the guidelines, and it's a reasonable request with reference to, again, meeting some of the grant guidelines and those expectations, you've worked with law enforcement and you've done these things, that they're going to give you the grant dollars. So I have a high degree of confidence that we'll get the grant dollars, but it's possible that they kick it back and say, well, you need to clarify this, that, and the other thing before they give you their approval. But I think we'll get what we're asking for based on how we've submitted, because everything we've done does correlate with their grant expectations. So
I wonder how many companies are out there that put the film on the glass, because boy, there's going to be a lot of schools that are going to be trying to do it at the same time.
That's the interesting piece as well, because up until we had that webinar, our thought process was we knew that there was this aspect of it having to be competitively priced, and we're in the process of getting bids for that film because we knew it was part of the primary approach, and we were getting, like, the lowest bid that we were aware of at the time was $20 per square foot. $12 for the film and $8 for there's like special caulk, for lack of a better term, that they put around it to seal it to the window. And when we heard this webinar, Maureen and I both looked at each other because they said, if it's not $15 per square foot installed or lower, we're throwing your grant out. You got no chance. So we looked at each other like on Tuesday of last week, or the week before, pardon me, and went, okay, so now we better get So working with Ed, and Ed was heavily involved as well, Ed and his people, got a bid that came out to like $14.50 per square foot, but we weren't aware of that piece until we did this webinar. Thank God we did the webinar, because at very least we figured, well, okay, if this is $20 per square foot, yeah, we're getting screwed a little bit, I'm going to admit that, but that was the lowest bid we had, and had that not been clarified, we would have said, fine, but then let's divert the rest of this towards the advanced, right? Because we thought we had that play. Well, it was shared in that webinar, no, if it's not $15 a square foot or below, you won't even be considered, and if your primary is not funded, they don't even look at your secondary. Correct? That was the interpretation, yeah.
Don't they think you have anything else to do?
So, and those are the aspects of the process that were quite unique with reference to writing a grant. And I'm not going to tell you I'm a grant writer, and I know there's always criteria. And I think it was the speed with which it came out of the legislature, which is, having the government move that quickly, I think is a feat in and of itself. But some of these things were not clarified. And I would guess, and I have no way of knowing this, but I would guess there's going to be a portion of the grants that were applied for that don't meet that threshold, and because you weren't able to do the webinar, whatever the case is. But I think we're okay. I really do. I think we're golden. I think we'll get the dollars that we requested, and we'll see. You'll get an update. Absolutely.
Thank you for your perseverance.
Yes. Thank you all for your hard work on it. Anything we can do is an improvement.
Can I ask a question? It says you're supposed to be in consultation with the police, basically.
Yes.
Do they think this film is worth it? I mean, all of a sudden, this is the recommendation. We don't know anything about it. Maybe Ed does.
Well, this film is, it's been around for a while. I've looked into it for the last 4 years. Stevens Point Schools did their buildings even up over 8 feet 2 years ago. Okay. And it is, I've seen demonstrations. There's some, if you go online and look up 3M Ultra Film, security film. I mean, the stuff is, it doesn't stop a bullet, but it keeps someone from shooting like a side light out and reaching around and opening the door, or shooting the window out and walking through where the pane of glass was.
It's the intent is to slow people down.
Yeah.
Right.
The intent is not that this is going to be,
Bulletproof.
right. So that it's absolutely more effective than just the regular glass.
If it's not installed correctly, though, it does absolutely nothing. If you don't have it attached to the aluminum frame or the steel frame of the door, the whole sheet will go out at once. You'll be able to walk through. And Stevens Point had 2 different people install theirs, and one of them did a really shoddy job, and they had to have it redone. That's why I was worried. The first installer came and measured all our windows, and he was going to use K&W glass, a local, for the glazing. I mean, window glazing is kind of a unique,
Yeah.
If you can caulk, you can't necessarily glaze a window.
Right.
So I'm a little worried. The 2 we ended up getting bids from, both of them, I mean, they didn't even have time to come up and measure our stuff. We sent our guys out, took pictures, took all the measurements, sent them in, because they were working with hundreds of school districts at the same time. And yeah, like John said, I don't know how they're going to all get installed. It's going to be, it's kind of uncharted territory here, I think, for everyone.
It's going to take years to get this all done, and somebody is going to get hurt.
The bid that we sent in, though, is from a glazer. It's from a glass company. The other bid came from actually a revenue limit exemption performance contractor, because you can put these window films on to make them low E, so you don't have the transfer of light through. And so they were a low E company that's going to do safety film. So, whether or not they can glaze a window, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't bank on it.
Thanks for the information.
Clear Gorilla Glue.
Yeah, there you go. Well, this glue is, super duty. I took a utility knife and tried cutting it, and it looks almost like a butyl caulk, but it's super strong. It's very expensive. So that's the thing. The film through just about anybody is between $12 and $15 a square foot installed. It's the way they attach it to the window frame that's going to cost almost as much as the film.
Sign of the times we live in, I guess. Okay, we're done with that. We can move on to the bills.
Okay, I would make a motion that the receipts be noted and the bills be paid as purchased.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second that the receipts be noted and bills paid as printed in our packet. We have roll call, please, Maria?
Mr. Krings?
Yes.
Mrs. Medina?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Rayo?
Yes.
Mrs. Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Head?
Yes.
Mr. Bembo?
Yes.
Thank you, Maureen. Now we can move on to new business. Possible action on employee appointments, resignations, and retirement requests.
There have been some additional requests that have come through since we had our committee meeting last Monday, and I believe Maureen distributed a sheet that has the listing of those individuals that we've had action on since last week. So unless there are any questions from board members, we would approve, or would recommend the approval of those listed.
The staff appointments and the staff resignations on this sheet.
I'm going to make a motion to approve the appointments and the resignations as listed on the sheet given out.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the appointments and resignations as listed on the sheet we were given tonight. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
An additional resignation request from,
I think we should adjourn.
Yeah, I know. I'll move it.
I second it.
Feeling allowed?
so
I don't think it needs much.
you have before you a resignation request from Dr. Christianson, who very clearly has served in the district for many years in administrative capacity as an associate principal at Lincoln High School, and now for the past 6 as Director of Human Resources. Very clearly, I don't know that you're going to approve this resignation with a smile on your face, because Ryan is absolutely a loss as he heads up to Marshfield to be the head of that school district there, to serve as their superintendent. On a personal level, I can tell you I don't know Ryan any better than anybody sitting around this table or anybody in the audience, but I can tell you he is well above bar with reference to how he conducts himself and how he does his job, and is one of the best administrators that I've ever worked with in my nearly 20-year career in education. And I absolutely wish him the best of luck. However, if it makes you feel any better, the joke's on him, because CISA has saw fit to assign me as his mentor for next year. Yeah, so...
Change your heart, Ryan?
Yeah, you know.
No escaping.
Some of the requirements of said mentorship are monthly meetings, and
Bring them back.
we will be certain to conduct all sorts of business.
Do you want to reconsider?
Before we have the motion, I'd just like to say, Ryan, I'm very thankful for your years of service to the district. You're most definitely going to be missed, and our loss is Marshfield's gain, so best of luck in your new endeavors, and hope it's a long and successful career for you there. Thank you.
And I also sent a note to Ryan thanking him for the body blows that he took in our wrestling problem, and seeing that through, and I appreciate that.
I reluctantly recommend the approval of the following administrative staff resignation request of Dr. Christianson.
Second.
Okay, we have motion and second to approve the resignation request of Ryan Christianson, effective June 29, 2018. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Congratulations, Ryan.
Thank you.
It was just because you got so much flack for long meetings, right?
Yeah.
Facts are facts.
All right, looking ahead at the calendar, we do have a closed session meeting immediately following this meeting, and we have a budget hearing on June 25th, this week from tonight at 6 p.m. And then we're into July, so with that, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.